Alright guys, I think we are live now. Hopefully everything is running smoothly. Welcome to Press X Podcast. This is episode 10, and I do think we have some pretty interesting topics we're going to be discussing and talking about today. So the first thing I'm going to ask everybody to do is leave the podcast a like if you enjoy it. It helps it out tremendously, and it's a really easy way for you to show your support. And I want to let you know that the gameplay you're seeing in the background is Resident Evil Resistance. It is the multiplayer component that shipped with Resident Evil 3 Remake. You're going to see me playing as the survivors as well as the mastermind. It's pretty fun. I didn't want to put Resident Evil 3 gameplay in the background because I didn't want to spoil anything. I know there's a lot of people who are still probably playing through that, even though it is a shorter game. But yeah, let me know what you think of it, because I actually think it's pretty fun. But yeah, we have some pretty interesting topics to go over and talk about here. The first topic we're going to be discussing has to do with I don't know if I should call it a group of Xbox fanboys or an individual Xbox fanboy, but there was some recent talk about PlayStation being doomed, specifically the PS5 having some serious overheating issues, and even worse than that, apparently developers having a hard time optimizing their games properly for Sony's next-gen console, which just doesn't sound good, obviously, and they painted a very bleak picture. Now, I do have a video dedicated to this, but I feel as though it is worth talking about some more here on the podcast, because it's what I've noticed ever since uploading that video is there's other people still talking about this that are kind of not fully understanding the situation. They're not realizing that the source of this information is literally just an Xbox fanboy who it clearly sounds like it's their fantasy for this to happen. So I want to talk a little bit about that. We're going to be talking about Phil Spencer's recent interview as well with IGN, where he talked about the big Xbox plan. He had some really, really interesting and very telling things to say, and I have to say that the confidence that is coming off of Phil Spencer as well as Xbox in general really tells me that they are not going to be pulling any punches, and they are in this to win it, and they plan to try to take this upcoming generation by storm. I think that much is obvious. So I'm excited to talk about that. I may even do a separate video on it later in the week for those who don't actually take the time to watch the podcast. We're obviously going to be talking about The Last of Us 2 delay and some of the big things that has went on there. That we do have a little bit of an update from Neil Druckmann. Nothing too significant, though. It really does seem like with a game like The Last of Us Part 2, given the current situation in the world, it really is just up in the air, and it is a matter of wait and see, unfortunately. And we also have some other interesting topics to talk about, such as Hideo Kojima talking about his next game and how he makes it very clear that he wants to make a horror game. He even alludes to his time making PT. And yeah, I just think that that's very interesting, especially the timing of it. And then finally, we have a topic in regards to IGN announcing their own event, where there has been a lot of conversation from PlayStation fans claiming that this event that IGN has announced for June is very clearly around the same time that PlayStation is going to be having some type of event, or at the very least, we can expect to see some PlayStation 5 games. So, yeah, I just wanted to give you a little rundown of what we're going to talk about in this podcast, but before we get started, I do want to give a shout out to all of the channel members. These are individuals who go above and beyond to support me directly, and it really is truly appreciated. I always feel extremely grateful to know that there are people out there who are willing to support the channel directly. And I'm going to shout them out now. We have DevilChild63, Junior Jackson, Jen, Tom1XD, Texas Juggalo 1, Ron Pugsley, Crimson X25, Enrico Kitching, Mr. Hamster, Dieter Ruse, David Gaines, Cleans McKean, D. Darko, Randy Lee, Xavier DJ, JV Rod, and David Torado. I appreciate you guys supporting me directly here. It really means a lot. And so if you are somebody who's interested in doing that, you can just become a member of the channel by joining it, and you will be able to support me directly. It's completely optional. It's just, again, for those who want to go above and beyond. And you do get a little PlayStation badge next to your name anytime you leave a comment on the channel as well. But diving into this here, guys, we're going to be talking about this rumor, I guess, if we can even call it that, about the PlayStation 5 overheating, and apparently how Sony is just panicked behind the scenes right now. They don't know what to do, and they can't get the heating under control. Now, the number one thing I want to point out here, just like the title says, is a lot of people have been making videos on this, and they are failing to acknowledge two things here. The first thing they're failing to acknowledge is that it's kind of been proven at this point that the individual who is making this claim, or the individuals, I should say, who are making these claims, are pretty well-known Microsoft, Xbox fanboys, which is fine. Like, I don't have a problem with that. Everybody is allowed to have their own preference, obviously, and they're allowed to decide which brand they want to support, whatever. But they're also failing to talk about the fact that this basically got shut down, and it got called out by Kotaku's Jason Schreier, who really went out of his way to highlight the fact that the person who is making these claims has been saying for years now that Sony is doomed, that PlayStation is doomed, and that it's just a matter of time until they're just basically out of here because Microsoft's just going to crush them. And it has become very clear that the person who has started this rumor is making it sound as though, look, PlayStation's done, and how convenient that at the start of a new generation where Sony's being particularly quiet, of course it's just nothing but bad news. But we have JV Rod here. I really appreciate that super chat, buddy, especially at a time like this. It means a lot. You say, keep up the awesome content, bud. I'm very interested to know what your favorite Resident Evil game is and why whenever you got a chance during the stream. Yeah, no problem, buddy. I'll answer that now since we do have Resident Evil playing in the background, and I did stream it yesterday. My favorite Resident Evil game of all time, I feel like it's Resident Evil 4, and I know that that's kind of an obvious answer for a lot of people. However, I will supplement that by saying that I played the Resident Evil Outbreak series on the PS2 for a while, specifically the first game, and I really love that game. I think it's really underrated, and I hope that Capcom does something with it in the future. I don't know, JV Rod, if you've played those games, but for those who don't know what Outbreak is, I would recommend looking up some YouTube videos of it because it's a pretty cool game, and they did 2 Outbreak games, and they didn't continue it after that. That's why I was honestly interested in playing this Resident Evil Resistance mode, because it's the closest thing we've gotten to an Outbreak game. But again, appreciate that super chat, buddy, and appreciate the question. And we have James C. I also appreciate your super chat. You're saying May is now Man-Eater's month. And yes, I believe, James, you've been talking about Man-Eater for quite some time here. I did look at the gameplay. It is very interesting. I'm seeing here that it says YouTube is not receiving enough video to maintain some smooth streaming. I don't know if this is just on my end or if you guys are also having issues. I would recommend maybe refreshing if you're having some issues. I think that YouTube's kind of struggling right now, so I just want to apologize in advance if we run into some issues, if the video just cuts out or if the entire stream just cuts out. I probably should have warned you guys about this in the beginning. YouTube's been giving me a hard time here. But, you guys in the chat, you let me know if you're having any significant issues with the stream, because on my end, it's telling me that YouTube's not receiving enough video to maintain smooth streaming. So just let me know. But I appreciate those super chat, guys. But getting back to the topic we were talking about here, about the PlayStation 5 and these rumors, Jason Schreier, as I said, called this individual out, and he even went on to kind of further explain, because there were some people pushing back against what Jason Schreier was trying to say. There were people who were basically trying to say that you know, he hasn't called anybody out and he hasn't proved anything, and he's not saying, like, he's not bluntly saying that this is untrue and this is false. And so he basically came out and kind of elaborated on it a little bit further and was like, no, let me be very clear here. This is like fan fiction level nonsense. And I find that pretty interesting, because the thing about Jason Schreier, and the reason why it's worth, yeah, and I see you're saying it is stuttering a bit. Yeah, I apologize, guys. It seems like the video feed may really suffer for some reason. You know, my internet connection has been pretty good so far, but it really seems like it's on YouTube's end. Like, just 2 minutes before I started the stream, it told me that I couldn't stream currently because YouTube is down. So I'm just hoping at this point that it doesn't just cut the stream. If it does, then we'll just have to play it by ear and take it for what it is. But I guess just focus on what I'm saying as long as my audio is coming through clearly. Jason Schreier, he's very well known in the industry, and I would say he's very well respected for being extremely credible. There's not really many instances that I can recall where Jason Schreier has said something or claimed something and it hasn't turned out to be somewhat true. Granted, I don't always agree with him and his you know, his outlooks on things, but that doesn't take away his credibility. He's been pretty on the, you know, on the money with almost everything he said. And so when we have somebody like him coming out here acknowledging this, because he didn't have to acknowledge it, he's coming out here and he's basically just like, this is nonsense. Like, this is just fan fiction. This is just people making stuff up. I'm going to take it from him. Granted, I don't think Jason Schreier knows everything. I mean, how could he? In fact, I think it's safe to say that most people don't really understand everything that's going on. How could they? I mean, Sony's probably pretty locked up right now, and they know what's going on. Obviously, if they are having issues, they're probably taking care of it. And so the whole idea that the PS5 is going to be overheating and that it's going to be suffering, yeah, I see the videos just basically going black. How's the audio though, guys? Is the audio still coming through? Because if I just have to chat the whole time while this is going on, then that's what I'll do. Yeah, video is freezing. It's having some problems. Stream is stuttering. I'm really just concerned about the audio at this point. It's safe to say that the video quality may suffer greatly. Of course, this has to happen when I'm trying to stream the podcast, but can you guys hear me okay? I'm not seeing anybody respond when it comes to the audio. I hope the audio is still coming through. MBG stream brought to you by the Creation Engine. Yeah, I just want to continue talking about the topic here, but it's seeming like we're having some issues. Well, I don't know if there's anything I can really do about it with the stream right now with the video. It says I'm checking my internet connection. The internet connection's fine. I think this is on YouTube's end. Like, I'm looking at it right now. I am tempted to switch over to a 5G connection, but it might temporarily take the stream down. And I'm afraid to do that because I don't want to have to start the stream up again entirely. Because I do have the option to stream with 5G, and I think that may actually help it. I think I might give it a shot. I just really hope it doesn't completely disconnect the stream. I don't think it will disconnect the stream unless I click the end stream button. So, yeah, I noticed the chat is so delayed as well. So, I'm going to give it a shot. I think we're still on. I think it's still working. I'm going to have to reconnect to the chat. Is everything okay for you guys? Did you guys get disconnected? So I'm just going to continue talking right now as if nothing happened. I apologize to you guys and obviously anybody who's watching this video after the fact. But, alright, hopefully this fixed the issue. I probably should have made sure that I had that 5G connection prior. But we're going to just continue on here, continuing with this topic. Alright, so to get back to it, that was a really annoying distraction. I wasn't expecting that to happen. But getting back to the topic here, I saw somebody mention that Rich of Review Tech, or Rich Review Tech USA, he made a video basically saying that, well, he wasn't saying anything specifically. It sounded like, based off of what you guys are telling me, he was reporting on this, but he was basically buying into the idea that, yeah, this could be true and that the PS5 could in fact be in trouble. And obviously he has a very big audience and, you know, a pretty far reach. And I think I saw that video I came across it, but I didn't actually click on it and watch it. But, you know, this is what I mean about, you know, I've seen people talking about this and they're not giving the full context, and it really just seems like it's kind of a smear campaign kind of made up by some Xbox fanboys who somehow it gained traction, I guess because Windows Central highlighted it, and, you know, they have, I think, some credibility. And I think it really just kind of escalated to the point where people are now upset and they're thinking that, oh man, maybe because of how quiet Sony has been, it really is not good. And I believe it was Red Gaming Tech. I hope I'm saying that channel's name correctly, but I think you guys know the channel I'm referring to. He claims that he has sources, and we talked about this last week, that are telling him exactly why Sony hasn't talked about the PlayStation 5 yet. And one of the main reasons is because they want to wait to show off the PS5 until they can have like playable demo slices of their game to show you like this is exactly what you're going to see and what you're going to get with the PS5. And this makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because if Sony is Sony is well aware that right now the perception publicly is that Xbox has the more powerful, potentially more capable console, has more T-flops, and so it's going to be up to Sony, and this is why I think if this is true, they are being smart, and it does make sense. It's going to be up to them to ensure that when they finally do show off the console, and when they show off the games, that they can basically just tell you right up front, like, these are PS5 games, and this is exactly what they're going to look like, and this is exactly what you can expect. And when people are looking at it and they're extremely impressed and they're like, wow, okay, I guess it turns out that 9.2 or 10.3 T-flops don't really matter. These games look awesome. And that's gonna do much more for Sony than talking about the technical aspect right now. I mean, obviously they're doing the best they can. There's no doubt that they're kind of cornered a little bit right now. I don't want to say their back is against the wall. It's not that serious, but they are in somewhat of a corner, and that's mainly due to their own silence. But it's also due to the fact that nobody actually knows the real reason why Sony has been so silent, and it's just all too easy to buy into the notion that it's a bad thing, right? They're being so quiet because there's bad things happening behind the scenes. They're not ready to talk about it. They're afraid, whatever you want to, you know, buy into. But frankly, I'm just not buying into that. I don't believe that. I think that Sony has way too much to lose to risk screwing up this much. And specifically talking about the PlayStation 5's overheating for a second here, I have a hard time fathoming the idea that Sony has been working on this console for years, and that at the last second, or not even at the last second, but where we are right now, it's at a point where they can't get the heating under control, or that they can't find a solution to it. Here's the thing. I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second. Let's just say Sony has been having issues behind the scenes with the PS5, specifically with the overheating issue, right? If this was the case, why would anybody assume that Sony couldn't find a solution? Especially when you have Mark Cerny talking to Digital Foundry, telling Digital Foundry that we plan to do a teardown of the console at some point in the future, and when we do, we're very excited to show off our cooling solution. Does that make sense to anybody? Like, it doesn't make sense to me that if Sony was having these serious critical threatening issues to the PlayStation 5, that they would be out here being like, yeah, we can't wait to show you our cooling solution that doesn't work and a console that's going to have a high fail rate. That's not going to happen. Like, I just don't believe it. It is really one of these situations where I would have to see it to believe it. That's not me being overly optimistic. That's not me being a PlayStation fanboy. That's just me honestly thinking rationally. Like, I think Sony has it under control. I do think it's kind of, I don't want to say it's obvious, but there's no doubt that Sony made some adjustments and did some tweaks to the PlayStation 5 to kind of, boost those clocks up as high as they could possibly get them to extract as much performance. And I don't know. I can't say for a fact that the reason why Mark Cerny decided to do this and why Sony decided to do this is because they knew that, Microsoft was going to have the T-flop / GPU power advantage, and so they wanted to close the gap because maybe they were going for a 9.2 T-flop console, and at the last minute they had to make those alterations to overclock it as far as they could. But here's something really important I want to read to you guys. It's an article from WCCF Tech, and I am thinking about making a separate video on this because, again, I know a lot of people don't watch the podcast, and some of this information is really important, and I think it's worth getting out there. This comes not too long after this rumor started gaining traction about PS5 having overheating issues, and more specifically with this rumor, the individual was claiming that Sony, and this is the part that to me it just made it very clear that this is just fan fiction nonsense, right? The person who said this, they're basically coming out here and claiming that developers are having a really, really difficult time optimizing their games for the PlayStation 5 because the performance is all over the place, because it's so overclocked, and because of the variable frequencies, right? And that makes sense on a surface level, like, oh, well, okay, if Sony's bragging about their variable frequencies with the GPU and the CPU and Smart Shift, I guess it could make sense that developers are having a hard time optimizing it because the performance could fluctuate. I'm going to read this to you. It says, following Mark Cerny's highly technical PS5 deep dive, a great number of questions remained, particularly after the PlayStation 5 system architect revealed how the next generation console from Sony featured variable clocks based on AMD's Smart Shift technology. For laptops, game developers have been used to optimizing their games for fixed clocks, which led many, including Digital Foundry's John Linneman, to imagine this would most likely be a problem. However, in a follow-up interview with Digital Foundry published on Eurogamer 2 days ago, Mark Cerny clarified the PS5 won't have any such problem, as it will all be handled automatically by the system. Developers don't need to optimize in any way. If necessary, the frequency will adjust to whatever actions the CPU and GPU are performing. I think you're asking what happens if there is a piece of code intentionally written so that every transistor, or the maximum number of transistors possible, in the CPU and GPU flip on every cycle. That's a pretty abstract question. Games aren't anywhere near the amount of power consumption. In fact, if such a piece of code were to run on existing consoles, the power consumption would be well out of the intended operating range, and it's even possible that the console would go into thermal shutdown. PS5 would handle such an unrealistic piece of code much more gracefully. And so, for those who are wondering what Mark Cerny's trying to say, he's just basically trying to say that, like, look, the console's not going to be, like, running into severe issues because it can't run the code. And he goes on to explain that the developers who are making games for the PlayStation 5 dev kit right now are making games on a locked clock speed for the CPU and GPU, and he's just trying to say that the console's going to handle it automatically. There's more here to read, but Sergeant SN, that's what I'm going to say. You're saying, what's up, MBG? Making sure super, what's working? Well, I appreciate your super chat, buddy. It seems to be working okay here. And I'm doing good over here. We're just trucking along here with this topic, going 25 minutes in. We did have some technical issues earlier, but I think they're all ironed out now. But again, appreciate that super chat. But it goes on to say here, that said, the PS5 system architect confirmed the console's dev kit support for fixed clocks as that can be helpful during game development. Still, he added that all PlayStation 5 titles will be exploiting the Smart Shift-based technology upon release in order to maximize power. Regarding locked profiles, we support those on our dev kits. It can be helpful not to have variable clocks when optimizing. Released PS5 games always get boosted frequencies so that they can take advantage of the additional power. Now, we kind of already talked about this in a previous video, but I feel like this is something that not enough people are fully understanding. Mark Cerny is trying to make it very clear that developers right now don't have to worry about optimizing their game, on a console that's has variable frequencies that are constantly shifting. They're making their game code set to specific clocks, and then people who end up buying the PS5 and playing these games, the console will literally automatically boost the performance of these games if it's able to do so on a game-by-game basis. That's how people kind of have to view this. The overclocking of the GPU is basically there to boost performance whenever it's able to do so. It's not a situation where developers don't know which code to run and like they can't optimize it properly because the GPU is fluctuating up and down constantly. That's not what's going on, and this is clearly some misinformation that's being put out there. We have Mr. Hamster. Appreciate you showing up and appreciate your super chat. You're saying, will you stream Final Fantasy VII? And do I like the GIF you just made? Well, first of all, I do like the GIF you made. It was from yesterday when I was doing my first puzzle in Resident Evil 3, and I clearly didn't know what I was doing. They are my biggest enemy, obviously. When it comes to Final Fantasy VII, will I be streaming it? To be honest, I'm not completely sure. To be brutally honest here with you guys, I don't really know how much I enjoy streaming games because it's not that I don't enjoy streaming games itself. I just, when I'm playing a new game specifically, it's really hard for me to actually enjoy that game when I'm live streaming it specifically because I have the chat, obviously, and there's a little bit of added pressure, but I also want to make sure I'm engaging with the chat. So I'm not sure yet. What I will say is I do plan on playing Final Fantasy VII, and I do plan on making multiple videos talking about it, kind of like review videos, giving my thoughts on it, talking about what I like, what I don't like, and I think it'll be very interesting for people considering I've never actually played a Final Fantasy game before. Final Fantasy VII Remake will be my first time, so as of right now, that's the plan, but we'll see. Things could change. We'll see what happens. But getting back to this topic here, I just think that everything here is telling you very clearly that you should not be worried about Sony having massive issues with the PS5 behind the scenes. We have some certain individuals who are trying to make it seem like Sony is doomed and the PS5 is done before it's even been shown off yet, which just makes all too much sense that, these are the types of people who are going to be saying this stuff. But we have not only Jason Schreier out here just basically saying this is nonsense and shutting it down immediately, but we also have Mark Cerny literally, he debunked this entire thing when talking to Digital Foundry when he confirmed that right now developers are making their games on fixed clock speeds and that the console will automatically boost games once they're in the hands of gamers, and if there's any extra overhead, the Smart Shift technology will shift that excess CPU power over to the GPU, allowing it to overclock. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that heat is not an issue, because heat is certainly an issue for both of these consoles. But again, you also have Mark Cerny talking about how excited he is to show off the cooling solution of the PS5. I apologize, I constantly have to reiterate here, but it's important that people understand this. Sony would not be bragging about their cooling solution if their cooling solution was not good enough. In fact, what Sony would be doing right now is the opposite. They would not be talking about the cooling or the heat of the console at all. They would stay quiet until they found a solution, and then they would talk about it. Now, if you want to tell me that like 3 or 4 months ago, Sony may have ran into this issue where they were having trouble finding proper cooling solution, okay, fine. But between that time and now, again, playing devil's advocate that there's any truth to this at all, clearly they found the solution and there's nothing to worry about. So there you go. That's pretty much the first topic. It's unfortunate that, there's basically a little bit of a smear campaign going on against the Xbox right now, but I have to admit that the second topic we're going to be talking about doesn't really help the situation too much, and this is, moving on here, we're talking about Phil Spencer giving his recent interview with IGN on Podcast Unlocked, but he also did a second one with the new series that IGN does where they talk about the next generation consoles. And let me tell you, Phil Spencer said some really, really, really interesting things in this interview. And in general, what he kind of discussed is the big Xbox plan. Now, I find it particularly interesting what he was saying because it seems like just a couple months ago, Phil Spencer went on record, and this is where maybe he's being a little bit sneaky here. He went on record basically saying that he doesn't view Sony and Nintendo as their main competition. He views Amazon and Google as their main competition, and that comment created a lot of controversy, and it really just kind of made people think like, oh, it seems like Phil Spencer's not interested in really trying to win the next console generation. However, if you watch this interview with Phil Spencer, it's very clear that they're going to come out, they've already come out swinging, but those punches are not going to stop anytime soon. And frankly, I'm happy to hear this. Like, this is exactly what I want to hear, because even though I am more of a PlayStation fan than anything these days, I still want to see great games from Xbox. That's what it's always been about. And there were a few things that Phil said in particular in this interview that really caught my attention. He talked about the Xbox Series X, obviously, and one of the things he talked about was how he felt when the specifications for the PlayStation 5 were officially announced by Mark Cerny. Like, how did Phil feel in that moment? Did he feel good? Did he feel surprised? And I believe what he said is that he felt even better about the choices that they made with the platform after the PS5 reveal, and he went on to say he even expected that that's how he would feel. So, we have Phil really beating his chest here just a little bit, kind of bragging about the fact that, yeah, they knew they were not going to be beat on power, and he kind of expected that this is how it was all going to play out. Now, I find that interesting because it's very clear that this is something, as I've suspected, that Microsoft wanted to make 100% sure that Sony would not beat them in this area again, like they did with the PS4, where they wanted to make sure that they would do everything in their power to try to have the more powerful console. And granted, they did achieve that with the 12 T-flop GPU. So, I think Phil has a right to brag here a little bit, and it's certainly something to be proud of. I mean, there's no doubt that what they're doing with the Xbox Series X is phenomenal, and for anybody who's going to be buying that console, you're going to be getting an awesome console regardless of how much you end up paying for it. There's no doubt about that. But what's even more interesting is that he talked about the price of this console. And I've seen some people now believing that, based off of what Phil Spencer said, that somehow the Xbox Series X is going to end up being a $400 console. Now, I'm going to tell you right off the bat, I don't care what Phil Spencer says about this console's price. Until he announces a $399 price tag for the Xbox Series X, I do not believe that at all. I really don't. However, I will admit the comments he made definitely should reassure gamers that it will not be above $500, because he talks about the price and performance and how he says that he's feeling really good about the price to performance ratio. But he also mentioned the CEO of Microsoft, Satya Nadella, and he said that right now they are able to be very agile and flexible with their pricing. Now, this is something that does concern me a little bit, and it should concern Sony, because that's the main difference here. Microsoft has a lot of money that they could easily burn through and sell their console at a huge loss if they wanted to. Is it a smart business move? I don't know. I don't work for Microsoft. I'm not the person being paid to make these decisions and try to figure this stuff out. However, I will tell you that Microsoft could do it if they wanted to, but I just don't think it makes much business sense for Microsoft, because, listen, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to put two and two together here to figure out that what Microsoft is offering with the Xbox Series X is not cheap. Like, obviously, they're trying to keep everything down to a certain threshold. Like, they don't want to produce a console that costs $800 to produce and then sell it at $500 or $400. They're not trying to do that, but there's no doubt that the cost of this console is most likely above $500. I think it's safe to assume that. And so if Microsoft were to actually try to go for that $400 price tag, I mean, they would have to eat a lot. But who knows? Maybe this is Phil's plan all along with Game Pass, where he can convince Satya Nadella to allow them to sell the console at such a huge loss, but it's not going to be that concerning because they can make it up with not only Xbox Live subscriptions, but we know how popular Xbox Game Pass is. And yeah, so I don't know, guys. I mean, as I said, until Phil Spencer makes it very clear, like he just announces the price straight up and says this is $499, I just don't believe it. But at the same time, the way he talked about it, it is worth paying attention to. He could very well just be trying to calm people's fears by saying, look, like, we're not going to go above 500. You know, maybe that's what he's trying to say, is that it's not going to be 550, it's not going to be 600, because there are a lot of people who do have this mindset based off of how powerful the console is, that there's a good chance it's going to be above $500. And I think that this is Phil Spencer basically trying to allude to one of two things. He's trying to allude to the idea that the console will not be more than 500, or he's trying to allude to not the possibility, but he's trying to allude to the fact that he knows they're going to sell this thing at 400, and that price is critical to them. Now, if I had to put my money on which one of those two is correct, I'm going to say that he's alluding to the fact that it's not going to be more than 500. But I will tell you this, guys. If the Series X, if Microsoft just pulls some kind of crazy move, just something insane, and they're like, screw it, we're going to eat like $200 on this console or more, and we'll make it up on the back end with subscriptions and services. If they sell this thing at $400, oh boy, are there going to be some very, very interesting conversations to be had at that point. Because the thing about PlayStation when it comes to pricing their console, Sony doesn't have as much leeway. They do. They have a lot of leeway, like they could eat the cost. But the thing is, Sony doesn't want, I mean, no company wants to eat the cost, but they really don't want to eat the cost because PlayStation, you know, they have the advantage of selling usually more hardware. And so because of that, you know, that's something that they make a profit off of more often than not. I mean, with the PS4, they were profiting for pretty much this entire generation at the price point that they were selling it at. And so, you know, there's a good chance that Sony will try to undercut the Xbox Series X, I think, all things considered. They might not. They might match it. But I will tell you, if Microsoft goes crazy and says, we're selling this thing at 400, then Sony will have no choice but to match it. And even then, that could be a problem for them. But I'm not anticipating it. I mean, maybe we'll see. I see some people saying that maybe the Xbox Series X could be 450. That is a possibility. Definitely possible. But we'll see. I mean, I just think that everybody listening to this, if you haven't, go watch that interview with Ryan McCaffrey and Phil Spencer on IGN Podcast Unlocked. It was really good. It was really nice. I mean, Phil Spencer's, you know, he's a pretty cool guy. I always appreciate that he does these things and he actually just talks so candidly and so openly. You don't really see many executives doing that, and I think it's really cool that he does that. But I think he's feeling really confident right now, and that's why he's basically just like, yeah, you know, like, we're executing on our plan. Something else he said in this interview that really kind of caught me off guard is I alluded to this earlier when I referenced something he said about how Sony and Nintendo is not their competition anymore. He actually said that he believes Xbox right now has a plan that can win. And that, I mean, there's no doubt about it. He's basically saying, like, he thinks that based off of the plan they have, they're going to win this next console generation. Mr. Hamster, you're saying, imagine Microsoft does a crazy move and gets you back on the Xbox side. Well, okay, I know that because I'm talking so positively about Xbox these days, a lot of people are under the assumption that, oh, MBG's just going to, he's a turncoat. I've seen a lot of people say that for some reason. Like, I'm going to go back to being an all Xbox channel. Like, no, I feel like I've grown past that. Like, listen, I've embraced PlayStation. PlayStation is where I'm staying because they've proven something to me that Xbox hasn't. And I believe Xbox will prove that to me this generation. That's the great hope. But you guys know, like, PlayStation has the games that I want to play going forward. Like, I don't care how much less powerful their console is or how less powerful the GPU is. I don't care ultimately at the end of the day. All I know is that the PS5 is going to be an awesome console. It's probably going to be at a, you know, an affordable price point, but more importantly, they're going to have the games I'm looking forward to, like Demon's Souls Remake. That alone, I'm in. Like, I'm in day one, you know? And so all I really want from Xbox, like, there's nothing they could do to make me, like, switch over. Like, the idea that I'm going to go all Xbox once again. Like, no. Again, I've grown past those days. I realize what I've been missing out on. What I will say is that what I'm hoping for is that Microsoft gives me a real good reason this upcoming generation to turn on my Xbox One X and play their games, or even go out there and buy an Xbox Series X at some point to play their games. Like I've told you, if they announce a AAA State of Decay 3, I will buy an Xbox Series X to play that game if it really looks like that AAA State of Decay experience I've been waiting for. I've been saying that, and I'm excited to see what Xbox has. And so, you know, that's actually kind of, I appreciate that super chat, Mr. Hamster. That brings me on to the next point that Phil Spencer talked about here that I think is absolutely critical that we pay attention to. He talked about what their announcements are going to be like going forward, because they've gotten out ahead here. They talked about the Xbox Series X. They pretty much revealed everything they could possibly reveal about the console except the games. And so Phil really made it sound like they have a lot of games. Now, I will admit that I'm feeling pretty good. I'm feeling pretty excited. However, I still need to see it. Like, I need to see the proof in the pudding, and then I need to taste it to know that it's actually the real deal. And I'm saying that because I've been burned by Microsoft last generation by believing what Phil Spencer had to say when he talked about games. But and here's the important thing you guys need to understand. I've always said, even when I was like a hardcore Xbox fanboy, I've always said that it seems pretty clear to me at this point that if Xbox has those big games, like those big announcements, like they're planning on making that big comeback, they're not going to do it until next generation or the upcoming generation. And based off of what Phil Spencer's saying here, where he says that they have a lot to announce, where they have a lot of new games and a lot of stuff that they're excited for, and he understands, and again, it's just talk, we're going to have to see, but he says he understands that the thing that's going to get gamers most excited alongside the console is seeing the games that you can play on the console. He was saying all the right things, honestly. He said, look, like, nobody's, you know, people get excited about the technology inside the console because of what they can do for games, and he's excited to show off those games. And he even pointed to him announcing Hellblade 2 alongside the Series X as a way to kind of set up what we can expect, where it's like, look, guys, like, we're going to have new games to show. And it does remind me of something he said back in 2019, where he said that they did have stuff to talk about, more stuff that they could have announced at E3 2019, but they decided it would be better for them to hold off and save it for E3 2020 going into next generation. And I'm thinking that that is Playground Games, what they're working on. I'm thinking that's the Initiative. I'm thinking that is potentially that State of Decay 3 game I keep dreaming about, right? And that stuff gets me genuinely excited, and that's what I want to see. And so what I'm trying to get at here is that I'm not saying, oh man, Xbox is going to win next generation. They're going to take it. They're kicking Sony's teeth in right now. No. PlayStation does have a lot to lose, and Xbox has a lot to gain, but the only way Xbox is going to gain that is by continuing on the momentum that they've been building up here with the Xbox Series X. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to come at the expense of PlayStation. Like, PlayStation doesn't need to fail in order for Xbox to basically reach that same level. I want to see them both do really well, and this is why I'm so excited, because I'm fairly confident that Sony has some big plans for next generation, just like Microsoft does. The only difference right now is Sony isn't being open about those plans, and they're not openly talking about them to where Microsoft is. And I have a really good feeling that next generation we are going to see an insane competition. Like, this is going to be like a heavyweight match where it's going to go round after round after round after round before somebody gets the knockout, and it could even end up in a draw, or being a draw. But you know, I just have to say that I really appreciate what Phil Spencer's saying here, and he's saying all the right things. And I'll put it to you this way. If he's trying to get people like me, maybe lapsed Xbox fans, and you guys know how hard I've been on Xbox. You guys know I ripped into them with the all-digital console. You guys know I ripped into them when they announced Bleeding Edge before announcing Hellblade 2. You guys know I've ripped into them for Crackdown 3 and other stuff because I couldn't take it anymore. And I'm like, this just sucks. Like, this just sucks, you know? if this is Phil Spencer's way of trying to let me know, hey, we actually have some much bigger things planned, and for the people who are waiting for the games, for those who have been waiting, and God knows we've been waiting, we're not going to disappoint you. Well, you know what? Fine. I'll give you the benefit of the doubt one last time. We will see, Phil Spencer. We will see. You know, you've proven with the Xbox Series X that you still take console gaming very seriously and you have big plans with the console. If you can bring that same energy with your games, then you'll have my attention. And I already told you guys, I'm excited for Hellblade 2. I want to see what else they have. And more importantly, I want to see if Microsoft really does bring the heat this time, right? Like if they really bring it with the games, I want to see how Sony's going to respond to that, because that is the one thing that I think Sony really has locked down right now, that's where they've secured all of their goodwill going into next generation, and I think it's going to be absolutely crucial that Sony doesn't, take it easy in that area. Like I don't think they are. Like I think they're aware that, like, look, we got to continue this momentum we've built up going into next generation with sequels to big games like God of War, Spider-Man, right, and like Days Gone and stuff like that, which I would love to see a Days Gone too, but new IP as well. Let's bring out that new Naughty Dog IP, even though we haven't even gotten The Last of Us 2, which we're going to talk about in a moment here. But, I'm not trying to make it sound like Xbox has anything locked down or anything, because there's still a lot of time left. However, I'm just trying to say that Phil Spencer came out, he was very, very confident, and he said a lot of really good things that, in my opinion, make it very clear that him and Team Xbox plan to take next generation by storm. And I guess I hope that Sony is, and I'm sure they have to be anticipating that. Like, I hope Sony didn't believe that Microsoft was just going to go into next generation without a fight, because Sony should know by now, considering this is their 5th console generation, never underestimate your opponent. No matter how far out they seem, no matter how far behind you they may seem, they can always catch up, because the second you trip over your own feet and your own arrogance or anything like that, well, you're just giving them all the time in the world to catch up to you. And so I'm confident that Sony will not make that same mistake. I think Sony kind of made it clear in 2019, before we got here into 2020, that they're not going to be resting on their laurels. They're not going to be taking it easy. They're going to make sure they do not get complacent. That's literally something Jim Ryan said. So I hope that does end up being the case. So yeah, that was pretty much the second topic. 2 really big topics we just talked about here, and we are going to move on to the third topic. But I want to take some time here just for a moment to ask the 430 plus people we have watching, if you could do me a favor, hit that like button to help the stream out, to help the podcast out. It's the easiest way for you to show your support without really having to do much of anything at all. So hit that like button. But we're going to move on to the third topic here, and that topic is The Last of Us Part 2 being delayed indefinitely. Now, I have to be honest with you guys, this doesn't surprise me too much, considering everything that's going on in the world right now. And frankly, what's going on in the world right now sucks. It really, really sucks. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's really anything that anybody can do about it. We just have to play the waiting game and sit back and hope that things improve. And, the gaming industry is just another industry like any other that is susceptible to feeling the effects of what's currently going on in the world. And what has happened here with The Last of Us Part 2 is just a great example of, even a game like The Last of Us Part 2 is not untouchable. And so Sony delayed it indefinitely. And recently, Neil Druckmann talked more about the situation on the latest PlayStation blogcast. And basically what he was explaining is that it's kind of out of their control, and what it really boils down to is the physical copies of the game. Logistically speaking, right now, they don't know if they would be able to deliver physical copies of this game to people who want to buy the game physically. Now, here's the thing that people need to understand. Sony has the data, okay? Sony and Naughty Dog, they have the data, they can crunch the numbers, and they can come to the conclusion, because believe me when I tell you, if you think Sony wanted or Naughty Dog wanted to delay this game, they did not. They've even confirmed that the game is pretty much finished right now. They're just squashing the remaining bugs. They didn't want to delay this. However, they have the data that tells them, look, enough people on PlayStation buy games physically, and also looking at the internet infrastructure around certain areas of the world, also knowing that they're having to throttle their own PlayStation network currently, it just makes for the perfect storm where the last thing Sony wants to do is, say, we're just going to go through with it anyway and hope that the game sells to our expectations, because here's the important thing people need to understand. The Last of Us Part 2 is easily the biggest game that Sony has launched in quite some time. I'd say probably since Spider-Man in 2018. And it's at a critical moment where they can't afford to have anything be screwed up right now, including sales, including people being upset because they can't access the game because their internet just literally won't allow them to download it until 3 weeks later, or because people can literally only get their hands on a physical copy of the game. One of the things that Neil Druckmann did say is they want to be fair, right? Like, they want to be fair to their players and make sure everybody can get access to the game at the same time. And then obviously the big question comes up, like, well, why not just release it digitally and then release it physically later? And Neil Druckmann did say during this blogcast that it's still on the table. Like, a digital-only release right now is still on the table, but they're still unsure, and I'm sure that there's just a lot of debating and a lot of number crunching going on behind the scenes with both Sony and Naughty Dog that are kind of making them feel like, look, we really got to make sure we don't mess this up, and it just sucks. It's a really terrible situation, and I'm not mad or upset because all I want at the end of the day, like, I can wait. I'm patient. I can wait. I just want to make sure that the game doesn't come out at a time where it's basically going to ensure that the sales do terrible or whatever, or just people can't play the game for whatever reason. I don't want to see a situation like that. And so we're going to have to wait and see what Sony plans to do with this game. I have a feeling that it's not going to go down the way we're hoping. I mean, I think what Sony's doing right now is they're waiting to see in the next 2 to 3 weeks if things around the world start to improve or if they continue to get worse. And hopefully they don't continue to get worse. Hopefully they do start to improve. And if they do improve, I think we could see a situation where maybe they just, they push it back by maybe a week or something. But at that point you ask, what about Ghost of Tsushima? Well, Sony said as of right now, Ghost of Tsushima is safe, right? So my big question at this point is, you have to assume that with The Last of Us Part 2 being delayed indefinitely from its May 29th release date, it's not going to release before May 29th, obviously, and it's not going to release on May 29th. The next time they announce a date, you have to assume it's going to be sometime in June or later. So at that point, Sony would have, unless they're crazy, they would have no choice but to delay Ghost of Tsushima, and I think they could get away with that. I could see a scenario where maybe Sony pushes The Last of Us Part 2 to mid or late June, basically replacing Ghost of Tsushima, and then Ghost of Tsushima gets pushed back to maybe late July, early August, maybe even September. I could see that scenario playing out just like that. Now, I did ask the question, and I think I posted this on Twitter, and I think some people were a little bit confused when I said this. I was saying, I wonder what the chances are that Sony will release The Last of Us Part 2 or Ghost of Tsushima, one or the other, certainly not both at the same time, as PS5 games. And people got confused when I said that because they assumed I meant as PS5 only games. That's not what I meant. What I'm saying is, considering how big The Last of Us is, it is bigger than Ghost of Tsushima, no doubt about that, and there's more anticipation for The Last of Us Part 2. Maybe Sony decides that we'll just put out Ghost of Tsushima in the summer, and then we're going to have The Last of Us Part 2 come out at the same time as the PS5, but it will also release on PS4. It's going to be a launch title, but a cross-gen launch title. I could see that happening. I really could. Now, I wouldn't be upset about that, because I think that would be a really huge incentive for a lot of people to buy a PS5, believe it or not. Even though it will be cross-gen, I think people would just be like, oh man, I'm going to go get a PS5 to play this game. The amount of people I've seen that have said on my videos that I'm just going to wait for to play it on my PS5 so I can play the best version possible, I think Sony could get away with doing that. I've seen some people mentioning oh, it's going to get delayed out of 2020. I don't think that's going to happen. I highly, highly doubt that. I think at the very latest, you would see it be delayed until the release of the PS5. And considering the position that Sony finds themselves in, I don't know what their launch game lineup is looking like other than Godfall. If Godfall is the only game they have, then yes, make sure you delay The Last of Us to release alongside the PS5 because Godfall isn't going to cut it. But I don't think many of us believe that Godfall is the only game that Sony has to be there at the launch of the PS5. So it's a really messed up situation. It's a really unfortunate situation. And it's a situation that really nobody can do anything about. It's just a matter of waiting and seeing and hoping for the best, but, you know, having to prepare for the worst. And in my opinion, the worst case scenario is the game gets delayed until, you know, it'll probably get, I don't know. I don't want to say it'll probably be delayed to launch alongside the PS5, but I don't know. I don't think that people will be upset with that if that's the case. We have Josh. You're saying, I think it's poor taste to release it with the virus. Josh, you do bring up a very good point here. I appreciate that super chat. Maybe that is another reason. I mean, it is a game about, you know, a virus or something that spreads worldwide and takes out the world, and you look at what's happening right now worldwide and you think, yeah, maybe that is not the best timing. So I don't know. Well, it's hard to tell if that's the reasoning behind it. We really won't know. I don't think anybody would outwardly say that. And Mr. Hamster, once again, you say gamers need to know health is more important now. And yeah, I agree. I mean, there's no doubt that people, I mean, I haven't seen many people get that upset over it, but I think it's a little bit ridiculous and immature for people to basically be like, what? My game can't come out right now? Like, come on. Like, read the room. You know, it's like GameStop, like trying to still stay open to the point where authorities need to tell them to shut down. Like, read the freaking room. You know, like, this is a really terrible time in human history, and we're making history. Like, things are going to be altered. Things are going to be, you know, messed up, and we just have to try to make the best decisions that affect, you know, to make sure it doesn't negatively affect people's health or well-being. And yeah, I agree, Mr. Hamster. People need to keep that in mind. We have Chris B. I appreciate your super chat, buddy, your donation here. You say, Sony should release the closed-door Last of Us 2 demo that journalists were allowed to play back in December. I think it was 3 hours, maybe to folks who pre-ordered. That's actually a really, really good point you bring up, Chris. I've seen a lot of people mention this, and I believe Neil Druckmann did touch on this in the blogcast, and I think his reasoning for not doing it was he kind of made it sound like they would have to put more work into the demo because, I don't know, like he was kind of saying that when they let people play it behind closed doors or publicly, they can kind of monitor it, and if anything's going really wrong, they can explain it or, you know, keep it kind of under control. But I do agree that, like, I think let me put it to you this way. I think the ideal situation, and this is just my opinion could end up changing, obviously, based on how the situation plays out. I think at this point, it would be in Sony's best interest to maybe try to delay The Last of Us to the release of the PS5, make it crystal clear it's a cross-gen game so you don't have to buy a PS5 to play it, but for those who do want to buy a PS5, it's an added bonus. You get to play it in its best possible version. And then when they make that announcement, mitigate the potential backlash by people who would be upset by announcing, but we're going to give you a 3-hour playable demo to hold you off. I think that would be the perfect scenario. Allow Ghost of Tsushima to stay where it's at, potentially delay it even further into July or August if need be. But I honestly think between Final Fantasy VII Remake and all of the other games that are coming out, hopefully that will come out and they don't get delayed, and Ghost of Tsushima, I think that we would be okay holding off for The Last of Us Part 2 alongside the PS5. And I just think it makes marketing sense, man. Like, I just think, listen, like, I just have this mindset, The Last of Us 2 is the biggest game that Sony has. Like, it really is. And I think it just makes sense. Just like Microsoft is bringing Halo Infinite out as a cross-gen game alongside their next-gen Xbox, bring your biggest game out, The Last of Us 2, alongside it. But, you know, again, Sony has the numbers. Maybe that's not a smart move. I don't know. But as Colin Moriarty always says, launch games sell really, really, really well, no matter what they are. So if you have a launch game that's a really big one, you have to imagine it's going to sell even better. But Mr. Hamster, once again, You said even MBG can't go to the gym and he didn't complain. Yeah, I mean, just like anybody else who tries to stay fit and goes to the gym, they're closed. And so we've had no choice but to work out at home. Luckily, I have some dumbbells. I do have some free weights, and I've been trying to make use of it. But I don't know about you guys, but for me, I've just been finding like I've been getting into kind of like a rut recently where I just like I find myself just becoming way lazier. And I think it's just way easier to become that way as of right now because of the situation, and I've been working out a lot less, but I'm trying real hard to get back on a better routine, and it's a depressing time, guys. Like it's really just a depressing time, and I'm not trying to be a downer on the podcast here, obviously, but I'm sure anybody, the 450 people we have listening to this, I'm sure all of you are feeling the effects of what's happening right now, and as I said earlier, it just sucks. It's kind of depressing, but we have to make the best of it, and we have to try to remain positive and do what we can. And that's why, I'm glad Resident Evil 3 came out. I played the story, a little bit of it so far, and I'm enjoying it. I'm really enjoying the multiplayer mode. Granted, I know it's not for everybody, but we just have to try to remain optimistic and just hope that things get better. Take care of yourselves. Be safe. Don't do anything reckless, obviously, and just try to take care of your health, not just physically, but also mentally as well. Absolutely critical at times like this. But, that's why I feel even more excited to do this podcast now, because I feel like it's a time where people maybe more than ever could listen to somebody like me just kind of ramble and rant a little bit, just to kind of get your mind off of other things and the reality of the situation just temporarily, kind of as a little escape there. But appreciate all of the donations and the super chats that you guys have been providing here during the podcast. But we do have two more topics we're going to talk about. Granted, I don't think they're as big as the last few we talked about, but they might be. So we're going to move on from that. We have 430 people watching. Be sure to hit the like button to help the stream out. But we're going to talk about the announcement that came from IGN, which I find kind of interesting, and I've seen a lot of people reading into this, and I don't know if they're reading into it too much, but it does seem kind of likely. IGN announces a Summer of Gaming event. Now, this is like IGN's own big event that they're going to be doing to cover, to kind of, I guess they're trying to use this as an opportunity to make E3 even more relevant by saying, hey, we're going to do our own thing here. And it's interesting because I believe somebody recently came out who has the inside scoop with this stuff. I don't know who the individual was. I just randomly read it on Twitter, so it could be complete BS. But they were saying that there was basically a big industry-wide publisher meeting with the ESA who run E3 as a last-ditch effort to pitch them why they should still go through with doing E3. And everybody kind of rejected it and were like, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing E3 this year. Sorry. And apparently one of the interesting takeaways was IGN basically said, like, what is the point of E3? Like, we're not going to really support E3 this year. And this comes shortly after the announcement that they're announcing their own thing. But what makes this really interesting is a lot of people have been, they have been claiming that PlayStation this is the time. Like, this is a clear indication that this is when PlayStation's going to have their big PS5 blowout. They're going to show the console. But at the very least, and I agree with this, it would seem highly unlikely that IGN would have this big... It's happening in June, by the way. So that's why I'm kind of relating it to E3. It seems very unlikely to me that Sony would have this big IGN Summer of Gaming blowout event without featuring some big PlayStation 5 titles. So I guess I just wanted to add this in here to just let everybody know that this is something that IGN is doing, and we're seeing this happen where a lot of companies and publishers, they're all basically deciding to do their own events, and I'm sure Sony will have their own. I'm not trying to say that Sony's going to partner with IGN. They might. They could. I think Sony's going to have their own event as well, but I guess what I'm trying to say is at the very least, I think it's safe to say that whenever IGN does this event in June, we'll probably hear more about the PS5. Somebody says PS5 might be announced before that because IGN says they're going to talk about both consoles during the summer event, and yeah, I agree with that. I think it's likely that Sony reveals the PS5 at the very least during June. Like, maybe early June. I don't see them doing it, later in June because that would get in the way of Ghost of Tsushima. And again, you then have to ask yourself, well, what about The Last of Us Part 2? And things get really confusing. But we have Henry here. You say, MBG, have you played the Yakuza games? Well, first of all, Henry, I really appreciate that super chat donation, buddy. It means a lot to me. And unfortunately, no, I have not played the Yakuza games yet. However, I have heard really good things about it. To be honest, I'm finding it a little bit difficult to get, like, as immersed into gaming lately as I would like to be due to everything that's happening. There's just a lot of added stress, not only in my life, but everybody's life. And I think, as I said, we're all feeling the effects. I'm not saying that that's an excuse. Like, I would definitely be playing Yakuza right now if this wasn't the case. I'm just saying that to whereas I was more open-minded about trying different games maybe a couple months ago, right now I'm just more focused on like trying to just play the things that make me feel most comfortable and just kind of help me relax and truly get distracted. And maybe at some point in the future I will play the Yakuza games. I've heard really good things about them, but there's just always so much to play. There's always such a massive backlog. It feels so difficult to try to keep up with it, and especially with the PlayStation games, like Nioh 2 came out. I thought I was going to play that, and I'm just like, where's the time? Like, I have the time, but it's like, I'm not in the right mindset to jump into games right now that, like a game like Nioh 2, it feels like the type of game that I would really need to kind of be in the right headspace to play. And even games like Yakuza, and I've seen some people saying, like, bro, you got to play, Persona 5 Royal right now. I don't think that's going to happen right now. In the future, it will happen, but I'm just trying to, again, when I have time to play games right now, I'm just trying to play stuff that's just really just a little bit, I don't want to say mindless, but stuff that just easily distracts, but we'll see. I appreciate your super chat again, Henry. It really, really means a lot to me, but we'll see there. We'll see what happens. But the final topic I want to take some time to go over here with you is a very interesting one. Now, this has to do with Hideo Kojima recently talking about his next game. And he made it very clear, in my opinion, that he just flat out said he wants to make a horror game. And he even referred to PT. Now, I find this incredibly interesting, not just because I enjoy Death Stranding, and obviously I think it's clear that Kojima's going to do something very different from Death Stranding, whatever his next game is, but also because of all of the rumors and the leaks we've been hearing about Konami, about Silent Hill, about Sony trying to work with Konami and convince them to partner again with Kojima. Now listen, on the last podcast, we acknowledged the fact that Konami acknowledged these rumors, and they came out and they flat out said, look, they're not true, at least not in the way they're being presented. Now, they said they're not closing the door entirely, but we have to understand that they're not shutting it down entirely. They did say that, they're not closing the door entirely, but they're just trying to get people to stop talking about these rumors and these leaks. Now, they could have done that for one of two reasons. They could have done that because it's just simply not true, and I will admit it's probably not. Or there's the off chance they could have done it because there's too many people catching wind of this and they want it to be a big surprise, so they're just going to lie. So that way the surprise really just hits that much harder. I don't know how likely that is. However, again, Kojima did say that he plans, or he wants to talk about, he wants to make a horror game. He talked about wanting to make a horror game. He says he would really like to do one, and that he already has ideas for one. And then he also says that he wants to make a horror game so scary it makes you crap your pants. So all things that I really am liking here, things I want to hear. He also referred to PT, but the interesting thing about him referring to PT, and this is where I think maybe this was his subtle way of maybe trying to acknowledge the rumors indirectly and let us know that they're not true, is he acknowledged PT and he says that that was a really special moment, but it was also an experiment and not something that he would be doing again. As in, if he were to do a horror game, it would be something very different from that, something that's its own thing. So maybe that was Hideo Kojima's very subtle way, because I'm sure he's well aware of all the rumors, maybe his subtle way of saying, look, we're not doing that. Like, we're not working with Konami. I mean, listen, ever since I heard the rumors of, Konami and Kojima working together again, I mean, it would never happen. It just seems so unrealistic. But I have to say, I am very excited. I don't care if it's a PlayStation exclusive or not. I just am very excited to hear that Hideo Kojima wants to make a horror game, because the potential that was there with PT, as we talk about, frequently, there was just too much potential for it not to be a thing. Kojima is too talented, clearly, with making horror games that he needs to make one. He needs to make one. And I really just hope that it's something they end up doing, and I would really just love to play a Hideo Kojima horror game. I really would. Spider-Man, I appreciate that super chat, buddy. You're saying, how funny is it The Who labeled video games addiction as a mental disorder, but now with the virus, they're telling everyone to play games to help with depression. Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit ironic, and it just goes to show that you gotta just take it for what it is when it comes to this stuff. I appreciate that super chat, Spider-Man, and all I have to say about that is, I'm not saying video games can't be addicting. I think it's very, very rare that people get so addicted that it can be related to substance abuse. I think that happens very rarely. I think it can happen. However, the idea that people try to give it a negative, look, video games are a great thing in my opinion. I don't think there's anything bad with them. I think that people can get addicted to anything, and I think video games are just one of the few things that people can get addicted to, and I do find it very ironic that at this moment in time, the CDC is like, hey, one of the best ways to cope with having to stay indoors right now and social distancing is play more video games. And I think everybody who games has been doing that. And I also think that a lot of people are also probably getting into video games for the first time. So if there's a silver lining here, I think it's that maybe this is an opportunity for people who maybe were not previously interested in video games or just didn't care about them. They're like, hey, we're gonna give it a shot now. So it is ironic, Spider-Man, and I appreciate you bringing that up, and I appreciate the super chat. But those are pretty much all of the relevant topics I feel as though I have to talk about in this podcast. But what I want to do is just take a couple of minutes here, maybe 5 or 10 minutes before we end it, just to kind of talk with the chat a little bit. I'm going to ask you guys to let me know what you think about the background gameplay. I know it's kind of running on a loop now, because I think it was only about an hour's worth of gameplay, but for those who've been watching, you're seeing this is the Resident Evil Resistance multiplayer mode, and I've actually really been enjoying it. I think it's better than people might think. It's definitely a little bit shallow here and there, but playing as the mastermind, which I'm sure you've seen me doing that, is incredibly fun. It's, you have to take some time to learn it, but once you do, it's really good. And so just let me know what you think about this gameplay in the background, and also just let me know what you think about Resident Evil 3, the single player, if you've been playing it. And I appreciate that super chat, MDLG. You didn't do any, you didn't say anything, but your donation really means a lot, especially at a time like this. I just want to thank everybody who has been showing support on the channel, who have been, showing up to the podcast, and those who support me by being members, and those who support me with super chats. At a time like this, it really, really means a lot, and it goes a long way, and I know that everybody's struggling, and so I just want to let you know that it does not go unnoticed, and when I tell you I appreciate it, I'm not BSing you. I really do appreciate it. But let me see what the chat is saying here. You're saying, bro, you should stream games more often. It's hard to do so because I don't want to saturate my channel with just games being streamed. But to be completely honest, it seems to me that the only games that my audience, the majority of my audience, is interested in are me streaming new PlayStation exclusives. So maybe that's something I could still continue to do. But I don't know. Again, I have to kind of be in the right mindset to want to stream games. Final Fantasy VII is coming up. I am unsure of what I'm going to do with that, other than the fact I know I'm going to buy it, I'm going to play it, and I'm going to talk about it on the channel. So you can at least look forward to that. Somebody's asking if there are microtransactions. Yeah, there are microtransactions in the game, but they're just for cosmetics. I've seen some people kind of like ragging on this game because they have loot boxes, but they have two separate loot boxes. They have ones that are just for cosmetics, and they have ones that just give you upgrades for the characters. And the loot boxes that give you actual upgrades, like tangible benefits in game, you cannot, as far as I know, buy them with real money. I could be wrong about that. I haven't looked into that deeply, but I'm almost certain that you can only buy cosmetics with the microtransactions. So, but let me see. You said you think it looks, Video Game Tommy say it looks good, but you'll wait till a sale. Yeah, I mean, if you buy Resident Evil 3, you get the multiplayer with it. I have to assume at some point they're probably not going to sell it separately. They'll just probably, like you said, put it on sale for a while. Devil Child, you're saying we love you. I'm not reading that, man. I'm not reading that. That just sounds weird and creepy, but I'm glad you guys appreciate me here. It does mean a lot. I try to keep up daily content. It's somewhat difficult, but I do my best. Let's see what else you guys are saying. You're saying Spider-Man loving RE3 Nemesis is stressful as hell. Yeah, what I played of it so far, it is. It's a stressful game, you know. But that's what it is. I've encountered Nemesis, I think, once or twice so far, and yeah, it's pretty intense, and I'm sure it just gets even more intense the further you go. Carl, you're saying at least we'll have Marvel Spider-Man 2 beats any exclusive games on the Xbox Series X. Anyway, Microsoft said the Xbox Series X isn't getting any Xbox Series games for 1 year, only cross. Yeah, we'll have to see how big of an impact that has with the cross-gen stuff. But yeah, I'm really excited for when we see Spider-Man 2. I think we'll see it sooner rather than later. Hey, MBG, do you think Sony's deal with the COD franchise, play first in 1 month first on PlayStation, will play a big role next gen? I don't know. I think it will. I'm trying to remember. I'm pretty sure when Modern Warfare 2019 came out, it came out that they did renew their contract with Activision, so we will in fact see them continue it. And I think it will play a big role. I think it does, because Call of Duty is extremely popular. Mr. Hamster is saying I need to read Devil Child's comment. I hear Devil Child's comments all the time in real life, so I'm not gonna read them here. Let's see. David, you're asking, can you be a mod? Well, you do support the channel directly, so if you're requesting to be a mod, I will make you one temporarily. But use it responsibly, okay, David? Use it responsibly. Obviously, I can demod anybody at any time, but so far, every person that I've modded on the channel, they've been doing a great job, and actually I don't thank them enough, so I do want to thank the mods of the channel. Really doing a good job, kind of trying to keep the chat clean, and also keeping the interaction up with the chat as well. So there you go, David. For now, I will keep you as a mod. MBG, are you gonna play Doom Eternal? I don't think so. I mean, I've heard such good things about it. It's, for some reason, it just, even though on the surface everything about it should appeal to me, it still kind of doesn't. If I play it, it'll come later on at a different time. Did I play Arise yet? No. In fact, I'm forgetting what that game even is, but I haven't played it yet. I'll have to probably look into it more. It's hard to find time for all these different games, man. You're saying Google made a deal with Activision. Yeah, but I think that's separate from Call of Duty, as far as I know. But I'm not too, you know, I'm not too up to date with all of that. MBG, did Naughty Dog block you on Twitter? I don't think so, as far as I know. I just checked them the other day, and I wasn't blocked by them. I don't think Naughty Dog really blocks anybody. I'm checking right now. No, I can confirm I am not blocked by Naughty Dog. So, that's good news. Let me see. Will I also buy an Xbox Series X? That's a question I get a lot. At launch, I only plan to buy the PlayStation 5 because I do have an Xbox One X, and Microsoft confirmed that all of their games will be cross-gen for at least the first 1 to 2 years. However, when I see a game that really gets me excited, such as I've been saying, State of Decay 3, maybe whatever the initiative is working on, maybe whatever Playground Games is working on, then I would consider buying a Xbox Series X. Crooked Vulture, you say, if you could pick any studio for Sony to acquire, which would be the most exciting to you? That's a good question. I'm going to try to keep that within the realm of possibility, because obviously, like, I want them to acquire Rockstar Games, like, never going to happen. I'm going to have to say, just like without thinking about it too much, Kojima Productions, mainly because of what Kojima's saying he wants to do next, that being a horror game. I think that would be awesome, an awesome addition to Sony, but at the same time, I would also like to see maybe Blue Point Games, because Sony has such a rich back catalog of games, such a rich history of games, and seeing the work they've done on Shadow of the Colossus and other games, as well as what they're going to do with Demon's Souls, I think that would be a really good get for Sony, really beneficial for Sony in the long run. But those are the two, basically Blue Point and Kojima Productions. I'm sure there's others I'm forgetting. MBG, all I have to say is holiday 2020, X all the way. Well, hey, to each their own, man. I think Microsoft has given people plenty of reason to be excited about the Xbox Series X for sure. I'm starting to lose it here, guys. I'm just saying random words. MBG, if you could make your own game, what kind of game would you make? I have no idea. I am not a game dev, and I'm not the most creative person, so I really don't know. I'm going to say something kind of similar to The Last of Us, but also unique. Like, I would try to think of something that could clearly separate it from The Last of Us, or maybe, actually, no. I'd probably go with something more along the lines of Bloodborne in terms of, like, that setting, that goth, cosmic horror setting. That, I think, because we don't get enough of that. I think there's a lot of games that already try to be like The Last of Us, so I'm probably going to say something similar to Bloodborne. Not identical, but something similar. Edgy Clementine, PSN, Cyberpunk, Clammy, V. Long name there, but appreciate your super chat. Really means a lot to me here. You say, been looking into PlayStation 5 stuff and sounds much cooler. Sounds like a much cooler piece of hardware, superior in many ways. Rely on TF hashtag is really generic way to look at console design. So you're basically saying that relying on the, you're saying teraflop number. I don't know why I read that TF hashtag, but you're saying basically relying on the teraflop number is a very generic way to look at console design. I agree. I mean, I think that Sony really is trying to do some different things here, and I don't think they're getting enough credit for that because, this is where Microsoft's marketing has been a little bit overwhelming, where they're basically like power, 12 T-flops, GPU power, we have the most powerful console on it, and they kind of like nailed it into people's heads. And frankly, Sony didn't do themselves any favor kind of going all in with the power factor in the beginning of this generation with the PS4 in like 2013 and 14. Granted, how could they not? I mean, they had the cheaper, more powerful console. They had to market it. It's just a marketing beat that they're not going to leave on the table. But I agree, Clammy, Cyberpunk Clammy, or Edgy Clementine. I think that the PS5 does sound like it will have some distinct advantages, just like the Xbox Series X will. What I don't appreciate are people who try to make it seem as though, like, the Xbox Series X is going to edge out the PlayStation 5 in every single area. I've literally put videos of other people explaining, other people who are very understanding of the technology behind the PlayStation 5, who were going out of their way to explain that what Sony has done with the PS5 will offer more tangible, keyword, tangible advantages than people realize. Now, I'm not saying that, it's more powerful or it's better than the Xbox Series X. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I think people need to kind of give Sony a little bit more credit for trying to do things a little bit different and, trying to basically make a really, really let's not just make a really well-balanced console. Let's make a console that's as balanced as it possibly could be, to the point where developers should never, ever run into any bottlenecks. That's a significant thing that I think Sony is doing, and it's going to be very, very interesting to see how it plays out in front of our faces when we finally see it. Because I do think that the Series X will have some advantages, and I think most of those advantages could potentially end up being visually, but visuals are not everything at the end of the day, and we're just going to have to see how each console leverages its particular strengths to try to do things in games that they simply couldn't do otherwise, or on the competing platform. JV Rod, once again, buddy, appreciate that super chat, man. You're going above and beyond here. Really, really helping me out here. Really appreciate that. And you say, MBG, what type of genre would you like to see from Naughty Dog's next game after The Last of Us Part 2? That's a really good question, actually, because I think... I'm trying to remember, I made a video back in 2019 that talked about a rumor of what Naughty Dog's next IP was supposed to be, and I'm having a difficult time remembering exactly what it was, but you guys can let me know in the chat if I'm wrong, and I'm probably going to be wrong. I could have swore it had something to do with space, right? Like, or is that Sony Santa Monica? I don't know. You guys can let me know. But if I had to choose, oh man, that is a good one, because I'm gonna have to say I would like to see them do something that is maybe something back in the day. Like, I'm thinking like Red Dead Redemption 2, but not that exact time period. Like, I'm thinking in my head like The Order 1886, kind of like that time period, but maybe like just kind of like The Order 1886 did. It's a different version of that time period where, technology is different. I would like to see Naughty Dog do something like that that's not just completely grounded in reality, but has that like storytelling element to it that they're known for, but really kind of being able to expand upon the world. Now, what exactly the plot would be, I can't tell you. Again, I don't get paid enough. I don't work for Naughty Dog to come up with that, but I would just like to see something maybe, I don't know, like maybe like a medieval type game from them, or maybe it could be something in like the West, something maybe in like the 40s, just something that's in a different time period that's not really so contemporary, to where they could really just kind of, I would just love to see what they could do with that, given how talented they are. It would be really interesting, I think. So hopefully that answers your question, JV Rod. Again, I appreciate your super chats today. Going above and beyond here to support the channel and also bringing some good questions. Spider-Man, once again, you're saying, what about the rumor that Microsoft is working with Kojima? Okay, so I know what you're talking about here, Spider-Man, and you're saying basically that you're referring actually to the Pastebin post, and it came from Pastebin, where, interestingly enough, it came not too long after the rumor that Sony was trying to acquire the IP, such as Metal Gear, Silent Hill, Castlevania from Sony. There was a Pastebin post basically saying the exact opposite, that Microsoft is planning to buy this stuff from Konami. However, the Pastebin post did kind of go out to further elaborate and explain that, the deal that Microsoft is working out, where they're going to allow Konami to have the rights to like still use the pachinko machines, or pachinko machines, whatever the hell they're called, and stuff like that. And if you want my honest thoughts on that, I mean, I think anything is possible, but I just feel like it's too outlandish. Even when I talked about it with Sony, it still sounded too outlandish. The only reason I entertained it with Sony, and I know people are going to be like, MBG, the only reason you entertain this rumor when it comes to Sony and Konami is because you're a PlayStation fanboy. Actually, it's because it was coming from an individual who has been correct about things in the past. They go by Aesthetic Gamer on Twitter. They haven't said anything about Konami and Microsoft, but now they're out here talking about the next Resident Evil game, that being Resident Evil 8, how it started as Resident Evil Revelations 3, but it got converted into Resident Evil 8 because of how much playtesters liked it. And he's been correct about some stuff, mainly with the Resident Evil stuff, but I don't know. I mean, as I said, anything is possible. So I appreciate that super chat. You're saying, MBG, imagine a Naughty Dog game set on the Victorian period. You're a detective and you have to find Jack the Ripper. That sounds pretty sick, actually. I mean, that's the thing. Is like, I think Naughty Dog could do anything. And that's, like, I just hope that whatever they do, JV Rod, you're saying medieval dark fantasy would be fantastic. Yeah, I mean, like, the thing is, I feel like you look at Uncharted, it's pretty contemporary, right? But also amazing. Like, it's an amazing series that's basically Indiana Jones, the game, and I know people don't like to hear that, but I'm just saying, like, the video game version of Indiana Jones, you know? And then you have The Last of Us, which is also pretty contemporary, although it is still kind of based in the future, but there was no progress made, obviously, because of the infection. So I would just like to see Naughty Dog do something just completely different, completely out of left field, just because I want to see them really flex their creative muscles in what they can do. Not to say that, I'm not trying to say they're not already doing that, but I think you guys understand what I'm saying. Like, just something that's like, whoa, okay, like, I didn't expect this, I'm all in, you know. Especially, I can't help but think about the Order 1886 and the potential of the world, like, the world building that Ready at Dawn did with the Order 1886, thinking about, you know, I don't know, like, Naughty Dog making the Order 1886 too. Obviously that wouldn't happen, but could you just imagine that for a second? That'd be pretty sick. But Royal, you're saying MBG with the PS5 SSD, I hope somebody jumps at a chance to make a crazy detailed big battle royale or survival game, because now it's possible they won't be held back anymore by anything. And that's the thing here. That's the thing. What Sony's first-party studios will be able to do with that SSD and that throughput when it comes to open-world games is you're going to see things that are achieved that are not possible on other consoles or other platforms with Sony's first-party. I know that there's a lot of people who are like, who is saying that the SSD is going to improve the GPU? Like, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that what developers are saying that what could be possible with that SSD, like that 9 gigabytes per second, what could be possible in terms of, like, not power. Like, that's the thing. It's not like raw power, pixel counts, ray tracing. We're not talking about that. Basically, when it comes to fundamental game design from the floor up, right? Like, what you could do in terms of, like, okay, a good example is like a space game. Let's say Sony Santa Monica, they are making a space game, right? The idea that you could instantaneously travel in real time with no loading screens from one planet out into space to another planet without any load screens, and it's all just one seamless transition. Like, that is what this SSD could do, to whereas if you tried to do it on anything less, potentially, or something less than it, it would get hung up, it would hiccup, you would need to have loading screens of some sort. So stuff like that, like, yeah, I hear what you're saying, a massive Battle Royale game. I'm all about Battle Royale. I mean, I know there's a lot of people who don't like it, but I still enjoy my PUBG, and I would love to see a Last of Us 2 Battle Royale. I know there's people who cringe hearing that, but I would just love to see that and what could be done, you know, because I think Naughty Dog, I just think Naughty Dog has so much potential to do so many awesome things. But yeah, I agree. Snakes, you said you lied, over-exaggerated when you were all about Xbox. Now you're doing the same thing with PlayStation since you converted. Okay, Snakes, look, I can admit that when it came to Xbox, I was damage controlling because I wanted to believe something where there was no evidence of it being true. When I was a hardcore Xbox fanboy, I always tried to tell people, like, things are going to get better. Things are going to get better. And I understand where you can draw that conclusion to where we're in a similar space right now, where it's like, oh, well, you're just saying that now because the PS5 is not the more powerful console and it's not 13.3 T-flops and you made it, you know, you had all these leak and rumor videos. Here's the thing, though, and I need you to understand this. Nothing that has been said or done about the PS5, to me personally, has been disappointing. And I think for most PlayStation fans, most, not all, they're also not disappointed. I think what it is I'm just trying to explain to people, and I don't think this is me damage controlling. I know there's people who want to see it that way. I really don't. And maybe it is, in a way. Like, Sony should be damage controlling themselves right now, where people need to understand that Sony's marketing for next generation has not started. And I think they may have made a little bit of a mistake by taking time here to talk about the PS5 in an official capacity, talking about the specifications, but not making it clear enough to people that this is just a developer talk, okay? Consumers are not meant to get excited about this, and they won't get excited about it. I don't think Sony did a good enough job in conveying that message, and so now, as a fan of PlayStation, somebody who runs a PlayStation-centric channel, I'm trying to explain to people that, look, you need to try to understand that this was kind of a mistake on Sony's part in terms of public perception. The PR, is not, the public relations is not going as smoothly as it should. However, it can easily be corrected because Sony's marketing for the PS5 has not officially kicked off. And once it does, people are going to change their tune dramatically. That's not me trying to oversell something. That's just me saying, listen, do we really think that Sony has been planning this entire time for next generation and they haven't been planning anything? That they're not going to have anything big? That they're not going to have anything significant? I don't believe that. I'll believe it if I see it, but that's not what I'm anticipating, and that's not me damage controlling. Even back then, when I was damage controlling for Xbox, I always said Microsoft will have bigger things to show and reveal next generation come 2020. And here we are, and look at how everything's playing out. And I'm just as confident when I say that Sony also has very, very big things coming that are going to silence people in a big way. I'm not saying it's going to crush Xbox. I'm just saying the naysayers, the people who are being very negative right now, it is literally just a matter of months until I think they are maybe kind of, a little bit more quiet than they are now. That's what I'm anticipating. And if people want to see that as damage control, fine. Look at it as damage control, but that's just what I believe. Because I'm not that worried, man. Like, they have too many dominoes lined up that could easily be knocked down in terms of the success that they could find with the PS5 that you're good. Like, I just don't imagine them not being able to, like, knock those dominoes down, man, and not being able to do that. They would really have to go out of their way to be unsuccessful this generation. They would have to go out of their damn way, just like Microsoft did in 2013, just like Sony did in 2006. And they both learned. And I think because of that, we're both going to get, I think both sides are going to get a really awesome console generation. We'll go a little bit longer here. I'm enjoying interacting with the chat, and it seems like you guys are enjoying it as well. Let me get a drink here while I'm looking at what you guys are saying. You're saying this, James, you're saying this consumer got excited about it. Yeah, that's the thing. Not everybody's down on PlayStation. A lot of people actually understand what Sony's trying to achieve with their console, and it's not always just about power. And I think because of that, there are a lot of people who are very excited about what Sony's doing. And obviously, in my opinion, look, the most exciting thing that Sony's going to be doing is when they show off the console, not that. That's not the most exciting thing. Yeah, that's incredibly exciting. Not the controller, it's the games. And when I hear from somebody like Red Tech Gaming who claims to have an inside source telling him that the reason why Sony hasn't talked about the PS5 in full yet is because they want to show games off alongside of it. They want to wait until they're ready. Look at what Sony has done in the past. Look at what they did with God of War, with Horizon Zero Dawn, with Spider-Man. With all of these games, they found a winning formula, and that formula is show off the games and exactly what they're going to look like, what they're going to play like. Show off those gameplay demos. Even back with Uncharted 4, they were doing that. I think Sony understands that, this is drinking some vodka between chat questions emoji. No, I'm not really a drinker. I don't drink, so you don't have to worry about that. I'm not gonna, an hour and a half into the podcast, I'm not gonna suddenly be like, drunk off my ass to the point where I'm just like saying some really regrettable things or something like that. You don't have to worry about that. But Mr. Hamster, you say, do a review on Resident Evil 3. Talk about how awesome the puzzle design is. No, Mr. Hamster, we're not talking about that. Velcro Apple, you're saying, are the SSDs going to mess with PC games when they're developed with SSDs in mind? Well, that's the thing. That's a good question. And that's the thing, man, is like, I will admit that the SSD that Sony has opted for probably won't come in, like, it won't be fully utilized by third-party developers, and if it ever is, it will be years later when the PC standard, like the lowest common denominator, is anywhere remotely close to what is in both the Xbox and the PlayStation. So it will be quite some time until third-party developers take full advantage of it. That doesn't mean they can't take advantage of it, but we're talking like maximizing that 9 gigabytes per second throughput. What's going to have to happen is you're really going to see it taken full advantage of by Sony's first-party games and the partner, whatever studios they're partnered with or publishers that are making console-exclusive games. I've seen some people say you can't even be excited about that because now Sony's putting their games on the PC. Look at Horizon Zero Dawn. To that, I have to tell people, slow your roll. Calm down, okay? Like, Sony announced one AAA game that's over 3 years old that was released for PS4 is going to PC. And they also came out that very same day and said, do not expect day and date PC releases, and we plan to fully support our hardware with exclusive games going forward, but we are willing to experiment. Now, I think it's much more likely that Sony is putting Horizon Zero Dawn onto PC because they have a sequel that they're going to be showing off very soon on the PlayStation 5, and that's a really easy way to get people on PC who don't currently own PS4s suddenly very excited for Sony's next-gen console, potentially, especially knowing that this console will offer RDNA 2 technology that's not currently available on the PC market. That's just my opinion, and Sony made it very clear in my opinion that you don't have to worry about their first-party games not being able to take full advantage of that specialized SSD inside the PS5 because of games going to PC, and then suddenly has to worry about, are they going to make two separate versions? They could do that. Very unlikely, though. It's much more likely they're going to make these games exclusively on the PS5. Now, if they have any intention of releasing them on the PC later on, is that something they might have to account for when developing with the SSD? Potentially, but I doubt that's what their mindset is right now. Again, we don't know exactly what Sony's full plans are. We only know what they've told us and what they've shown us, and everything that they've told us and shown us says they're not making the jump to PC anytime soon, not immediately anyway. And they're just kind of maybe going to start experimenting by putting some of their older games on that are released on PS4. So, some good questions you guys have here. David, you say in all honesty, form factor is fun to wonder about and all, but at the end of the day, I don't care if the PS5 looks like a potato. I still buy it day one. Yeah, I'm hoping it looks cool. I think the Xbox Series X form factor is growing on me a little bit. I think that's mainly just because I realize a console like that could easily fit my entertainment center. And because I'm like, oh, okay, maybe it doesn't look that bad. But I am, again, referencing Red Gaming Tech once more on this podcast, his inside source told him that Sony, if it's to be believed, of course, Sony's console design is considered very innovative. So I don't know what exactly that means or what that's going to translate to, but I'm interested. I'm intrigued. Let me see. Can Sony just not shut up the claims of overheating? Just say it's a lie or not let their fans, don't leave their fans like this. I understand what you're saying, buddy. You're basically saying Sony needs to address the rumors, but here's the thing. If Sony knows, people think that Sony's silence is such a bad thing, but it might not be. And that's what people, I feel don't fully understand as well, is that just because Sony is still being silent, just because they don't feel pressured to come out here and acknowledge and shut down every negative rumor or every negative article that's being written up about them, there are some things they're clearly trying to clarify, such as the clock speeds. They're just trying to let people know, allowing Mark Cerny, that is, to let people know that the clock speeds are not locked, or they are locked for developers, but they're not going to be, and they will boost your games, just to clarify the specs and what exactly, to clarify information they already have out there, people need to understand that just because they're silent doesn't mean it's bad news. For all we know, they could not be saying anything right now because of everything that's going on in the world, and they're just we just want to wait until things are not as crazy as they are now. They could be waiting because they are just waiting for the right moment, in their opinion. People need to understand, while we did know a lot more about the PS4 by this point in time in 2013, we still didn't see everything, not nearly everything. Sony didn't really have their big reveal and, all of the information that was relevant and critical and important until June, around E3. That's when they showed off the form factor of the console. That's when they showed off more games. That's when they talked about all their policies. That's when they made it clear everything they're going to be doing from the transition to PS3 to PS4. It was in June. So people who are making it sound like just because Microsoft is rushing, that means Sony has to rush. Not necessarily. Microsoft is being smart by rushing now because they're in a position where they should be doing that. Sony, in my opinion, is also being smart because they don't need to rush it right now. I will agree that the silence does create some negative conversations in some certain areas, but overall I think people are just being overly pessimistic about it. And I will admit that the one thing I can't stand about the silence is it does breed a crap ton of rumors and leaks, and sure, we all are well aware of how burned I ended up getting because of those rumors and leaks, but hey, you know, I was just hyped, man. Like, I couldn't help it. Everybody else seemed hyped, and I'm like, you know, let's go over this because we don't have really anything else to talk about when it comes to next gen. So, let's see here. Xbox should have given up years ago. They can't beat PlayStation. Well, I don't agree. I don't want to see Xbox give up. Like, I'm glad they're doing what they're doing because I want to see that competition. I want to see them try to match what Sony's doing because in the end, that means better things for us. But, Patrick, you're saying you just realized it's been almost 3 weeks since the PS5 deep dive. Hopefully their next reveal is soon. Yeah, I don't know, man. It's really hard to tell. It's really hard to tell. Nickub, you're saying if you go back to the PS4 Pro MBG, you can listen to Sony saying that they want to take more of an Apple approach and reveal hardware and stuff closer to its actual release. That's what they're following right now. And yeah, I mean, if that's what they said in 2016 with the reveal of the PS4 Pro, then I believe them, and it makes a lot of sense to do that. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Mr. Hamster, you're tired of all the fake rumors, man. Yeah, me too. It's, you know, sometimes it's exciting because you think, wow, maybe this could be true, but then you realize like almost everything has been incorrect, and it's like you can't really go off of that stuff anymore. Spear Bomb, you went crazy, MBG. I don't think I went crazy. I mean, keep in mind, like, when I was talking about those leaks and rumors, a lot of people were showing just as much interest as I was. So I was like, well, you know, my audience is interested, so I'm going to talk about them. It just sucks that pretty much all of them turned out to be fake, which, as far as we know, every single one, not every single one, but like 90% of them were not legitimate. There's still some stuff we talked about that has yet to be talked about yet, so we don't actually know. John Mendoza, appreciate that super chat, buddy. It really means a lot to me. You're saying, MBG, Sony hasn't begun to promote the PS5. Really? Retrace the timeline, and why do you choose to trust Red Gaming Tech's sources? His sources haven't predicted anything correctly. Well, okay, I appreciate the feedback. I think it's fair to say, like, basically, if you're trying to say to me, first I'll acknowledge Red Gaming Tech. You're right. I don't have any reason to trust what he's saying or what his sources are saying. And I can admit they could be completely false. And I'm not telling anybody here to believe that as well. I'm simply just relaying the information that, hey, this is what somebody's saying who claims to know what's going on, and it might not be true. Listen, I'm just saying if I had to put my money on it, right? If I had to put my money on it, is Sony behind the scenes panicking? Or is it because they're just not ready to show it and they're waiting for the right time to show it? I'm going to put my money on they're waiting for the right time to show it because it doesn't make, there's too much evidence that Sony is not panicking. But I do understand what you're saying. That is fair. I'm not saying that his sources are 100% correct. They could be completely incorrect. I'm not saying you should trust him blindly. I'm just saying this is what he's saying. And as for your first question, you're saying, you know, Sony hasn't begun to promote the PS5, retrace the timeline. That's fair. Like, I understand that there's a lot of people who have the stance Sony has already started talking about the PS5, so as far as you're concerned, the marketing has started, and they've done a crap job marketing it. I can understand that mindset. However, I just don't think it's that serious. Like, I don't think that people are that down on it. I think the thing that people are really mostly down on is they're looking at Sony and they're like, if you're going to talk about it again, Sony, please show something. I think that's what it comes down to. I think that Sony has put themselves in a position where they have made it far too easy to allow people to run with this whole 12 T-flop greater than 9/10 T-flop narrative. And frankly, Sony hasn't shown anything to get people to stop talking about that narrative. So I understand what you're saying, John Mendoza, and I think that you bring up some fair points, and I'm not trying to make it seem like Sony hasn't done anything wrong, because I will encourage you to go watch my videos where I the first couple of videos I put out after Mark Cerny's deep dive, where I did explain that while I don't have a big problem with what they've been showing and what they've been talking about specifically, I do have a problem with the fact that they seem like they're not fully understanding that people are looking at this as the PS5's marketing, even though it's not. Like, this isn't, I don't know if this was part of their big marketing plan. I do not think it is. A lot of people don't understand that, and Sony's doing a poor job in distracting them or putting something out to shift their mindset from that. So again, I appreciate the super chat, even though, you know, you're bringing up points to kind of counter what I'm saying. I do appreciate your super chat nonetheless, buddy, and you do bring up some good points there. So let's see what else you guys are saying. You're saying my cousin's sister's dog works for Sony, and he said that Sony's going to skip PS5 and go straight to PS6. Well, there you guys have it. We're hearing it right here first. His cousin's sister's dog works for Sony, and apparently the PS5 is canceled. They're going right to the PS6. Yeah. Let's see. You're saying, Carl, you're saying the rumor about PS5 overheating was fake. Jeff Rickle got called out for lying and deleted his tweet about PS5 overheating and set the Twitter account to private. Yeah, I made a video acknowledging that. There was something else I wanted to mention, but it completely slipped my mind. I saw somebody bring it up. Okay, yeah. This was something I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about the second topic, talking about Phil Spencer. He was talking about their big plan for next generation with Xbox. One really important thing he said about the games, because I was putting a lot of emphasis on how Phil Spencer was talking a lot about how they have a lot of games to show and he's really excited and they're going to go full force in game announcements. I totally forgot to mention that one of the things he really kind of emphasized on was the fact that they are willing to announce things way ahead of time, because he said that their roadmap now is like kind of solid and he knows like what the roadmap looks like, and because of that they're going to be willing to announce things that like much further in advance. And I meant to talk about that because that tells me that, yeah, just as I suspected, Microsoft's bringing the big guns, and I hope they are. This is the thing that we've been kind of like waiting for. I think they're going to do it, and I think that they're going to show projects that are possibly 2 years out, maybe even 3 years out potentially, but it's in an effort to get people excited and completely change the tune for Microsoft going into next generation, showing, look, check out all of these awesome games we have. And I don't think people are going to care too much about how far out they are. They're just going to be excited that this is what you can expect. And I think that's actually really smart, and I hope Sony does the same thing. I think they will, because it makes a lot of sense. Get people excited for a future investment. This is the time to do that. But I thought that that was a really important point to bring up. I'm annoyed that I waited about almost 2 hours into the podcast to bring that up, but still, I was sure to get it in here. But we'll go for a couple more minutes here. I think we'll go until we hit the 2 hour mark with the podcast here. Try to leave it at 2 hours. I think is pretty good. Let's see what you guys are saying once again. Saying people need to chill for a few months. I do agree with that. I think that there's a lot going on right now, and I think it's understandable why maybe each company, or I think it makes it more understandable why Sony's maybe slowing their roll. Microsoft will buy new studios too. Okay, I want to know what's going on with Dying Light. Okay, that game got delayed indefinitely a little while ago, and that's from Techland, and we haven't heard anything about it. And I've seen people kind of speculate that that's because Microsoft acquired Techland as a first-party studio. I don't know if I believe that, but I mean, what's up with that game? It just got delayed indefinitely. Maybe this is why. Maybe, what's going on right now in the world, they kind of foresaw it, and they're like, nope, let's just delay it. You're saying Neil Druckmann says The Last of Us will release digitally. Well, I don't think he confirmed that it's releasing digitally. I think he just said that it's still on the table, that Sony is still considering possibly releasing it digitally, even though they can't get physical copies out in time. But we don't know. We have to wait to see. I don't think they're going to do that. I just don't think they will. Let's see. So say what if saying MBG, what if Sony had a tower as well and Microsoft knew this and decided to push their design out before them, so Sony would look like a copycat, and now Sony's trying to redesign? I mean, that would I'm not saying it's not possible. I just think that would be a lot of internal company, corporate espionage going on there. It's possible. I think it's much more likely that if Sony had to do a last-minute redesign, it's more likely because they decided, okay, we're going to try to overclock this thing as far as we can, and because of that, we are going to have to slightly redesign it, and we're going to have to look into a better cooling solution. I think that makes a lot more sense. I think they have it under control. That's just my thoughts on it, though. Yeah, you're saying Dying Light was announced for PlayStation as well, though, right? And yeah, it was announced for PlayStation, but again, it's delayed. Yeah, that's true. So even if Microsoft did acquire them, it would, I think, still come out on PlayStation. And you're also saying, somebody else is saying, yes, Microsoft wants to buy a Poland studio like Techland. They are a Polish studio, yes. It's possible. That would be a huge get for Microsoft if that was the case. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, we're going to have to see. You're saying, I think the V-shape rumor, or the rumor about the V-shape console, is much more likely. That's why the cooling system is so unique. Yeah, I mean, one thing we've established is that the design of the PlayStation 5 dev kits, it seems over-engineered, right? Like the design itself, like it looks nicer than, or just like more well thought out than most other dev kits. Maybe that's why. I mean, it will definitely look different. But that V shape, I do wonder if they're going to try to... excuse me, I'm losing my voice here a little bit. I do wonder if they're going to try to retain that V. I mean, I would be okay with it. I wouldn't care. Okay, yeah, that is one other thing I forgot to mention earlier when we talked about The Last of Us 2 delay. Somebody's asking me if I saw The Last of Us 2 leaks. I've only seen one, and it was just of Ellie gameplay. It was like a minute of Ellie gameplay. I'm not even going to talk about what it was because leaks are starting to come out, and I meant to say this earlier, but you guys should, keep an eye out for that. I don't know who's doing it or how they're doing it, but if you don't want anything spoiled, just keep an eye out. I won't post anything like that on my channel. I'm not going to post any leaks. I'm not going to post anything that hasn't been showed off officially by Naughty Dog, and the gameplay that's out right now was not shown off officially. So if you want to look them up yourself, you can, but I don't want to entertain it on the channel. So just keep an eye out for that. And Velcro Apple, you're saying you think Microsoft bought Techland. We'll see. It's hard to tell. I mean, they just abruptly delayed their game indefinitely. At around the same time, there were rumors circulating that Microsoft was searching for a Polish studio. But okay, Brian, you're saying I seriously doubt Techland. They are featured in PlayStation's official magazine this month talking about Dying Light. So yeah, that's a huge indicator that they're not doing anything with Microsoft. They just legitimately had to delay their game for whatever reason. Let me see. Is there any chance that the PS5 Pro will be released at the same time that the regular PS5? That would be a big surprise. I mean, I doubt it. I'm not saying, I mean, it's within the realm of possibility, just far-fetched. It's very far-fetched. I mean, if it's like some big move that Sony had, I think it's much more likely that Sony will opt to do a mid-gen refresh with the PS5 Pro, just like they did with the PS4 Pro. That's my thoughts. But anyway, guys, that is going to do it for episode 10 of the Press X podcast. My voice is starting to go a little bit hoarse here, and we talked a lot about all different topics today, and I think the podcast went really well. I want to take a moment to ask you guys to leave the podcast a like one last time before you leave to help it out. We're at 332 likes. Let's see if we can get it up to 400. We have 372 people watching, so leave it a like before you head out, and anybody who's watching after the fact, also be sure to leave the podcast a like to help it out. I want to take a moment to thank everybody who showed up to watch and hang out with me here, especially those of you who have donated super chats and the members of the channel. And I also want to thank the moderators for keeping the chat clean, doing a good job, making sure we're just having some, productive conversation. No need for people to be nasty or anything like that. So I hope you guys take care of yourselves, stay safe, don't be reckless, play some games, and look forward to the content I have coming up later this week. I don't know what the week holds in terms of news, but I'm going to do my best to keep the daily content coming. And we have Final Fantasy VII Remake coming up, so we'll definitely talk a little bit about that on the channel as well. And so once again, thank you for your support. I think this was a really solid episode. Be sure to leave it a like before you leave. And until next time, guys, take care.